Good afternoon to those that may be joining us online. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Lisa Jacobson. I'm president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. We are here at a really important event. It's called Powering Prosperity, Grid Upgrades for the Community, Economy, and Climate. Just some housekeeping notes, which I'm discovering myself. I think for all of our speakers and anyone who asks a question, please put the microphone very close to your mouth. And if you can't hear me, just cue me and I'll do the same for all of you, okay? And then if you're here in the audience, it looks like everybody has a headset on, but it would be a lot easier to hear us if you have a headset on. So please do put that on. Very excited about this event because the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, as you all know, is a broad-based energy trade association. We are founded in the early 1990s around the climate movement as the Earth Summit was occurring. U.S. industries from the energy efficiency sectors, the natural gas sectors, and the renewable energy sectors came together and said, we have technology solutions that can help address climate as well as other global environmental issues. And ever since that time, in 1992, we've been participating as industries in these negotiations and, very important now, the action agenda. But when we take a North American view, especially in the last couple of years, climate and energy demand increases have really been defining our energy choices. And so this event, where we're going to be talking about what the different roles are for the grid, for demand-side solutions, for supply-side solutions, how do we tie it all together and use new innovative technologies driven by AI, ways to optimize the energy systems and integrate the energy systems. Again, it's not just power. We've got power and fuels we need to manage as we think about decarbonizing our economy. So it's really an exciting time, but it's also very challenging because many of the issues when it comes to the grid in the United States are decided at multiple levels. We don't have a national energy grid policy, and I think many of us have been seeking some kind of direction like that for many years. But just given the way these markets are regulated, given the way the grid is regulated, we've got multiple decision makers and multiple states that these decisions are impacted by. So it's complicated. So my hope for today is that we can talk a little bit about what's going on in the United States when it comes to grid, but we could also learn from other countries because we've got UK perspective, European perspective, Brazilian leadership perspective with us. So I'm really looking forward to it. So let me tell you who you're going to be hearing from today. We've got three amazing speakers. Helen Walter Terranoni, Director of Global Climate Policy for Trane Technologies. We have Angelo Rocha de Oliveira, the Association of Energy Engineers Brazil Chapter President. Louise Clark-White, Director of International Sustainability for National Grid. And I'm really pleased to say we have two BCSE board members represented on this panel with Trane Technologies and with National Grid. So thank you for your support and your collaboration. So I'd like to ask each one of you to please take a moment or two and introduce yourself and just tell me what drives decision making about the grid from your organization or company's perspective. So Angelo, let's start with you, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here representing AE. I'd like to talk a little bit about Association of Energy Engineers. AE is an association that is present in more than 140 countries around the world. There are many engineers, architects, and many people that deals with energy associated. We deal with renewable energy efficiency, and we are very focused on training in terms of to have international certifications to enhance the capacity, the technical capacity of the people that deal with energy. Okay, and a little bit about me. I'm electric technician. I'm graduated in electrical engineering, master and PhD, and in energy. I have the whole career in the energy area.
We need many, many more of you right now around the world.
I've been working in the last 20 years with energy efficiency and R&D for electric sector. And my research is related with new materials, new ways to operate the grid. And I work with chemistry and biology and many kinds of different professionals. I make part of Intech Lab. That's a multidisciplinary lab in my institution, the CEFET-MG, the Federal Center of Technological Education in Brazil. And then I am the electrical engineer of the group, but we have mechanical, civil, many specialties, because the future needs many people thinking about the same problem, but many different points of view. We are not supposed to put in the same room only electrical engineers. We need more points of view in order to develop. And then we have been developing many new products, new sustainable products for the operation of distribution systems. And then this is what I have been doing in the last 10 years.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Louise, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about National Grid.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. It's really nice to be here. I'm actually a bit of an interloper today. My colleague was supposed to be on the panel, but she's got delayed by a day by her flight, so you'll have to make do with me. So Lisa introduced me. I lead the international sustainability team at National Grid, which day to day means I kind of engage internationally. And at the moment, my focus is on leading on what everything National Grid is doing at COP. So the kind of day-to-day grid sort of operation management is not my day job, but I have the privilege in my role of getting a great overview of what we're doing across the UK and the US in our businesses, because we share that then internationally and try and share best practice and learning. National Grid is a networks business in the UK and the Northeast US. So we own and operate electricity distribution and transmission networks in the UK and in the Northeast US in Massachusetts and New York. We also have some gas networks in the US as well. And that's our regulated businesses, which makes up the majority of our business. But we also have a commercial arm, National Grid Ventures, which invests in interconnectors between the UK and Europe. So we kind of do subsea interconnection, so have a lot of expertise on that, which is always something that other countries want to hear about. This is very useful in terms of connecting regions. So yeah, we are a grid company. So I think thinking about what do we do about grids, I mean, that's our day-to-day. If I'll take your question and say, what do we do about, how are we thinking about modernizing grids? And National Grid's vision really is reliable energy, resilient networks that are ready for the future, and clean energy is obviously totally central to that future. And grid modernization has to be a part of that, and I think that's really exciting. As you were saying, Lisa, I think that conversation has become really prevalent in the last few years, particularly in these global forums. I think at COPs maybe 3-4 years ago we weren't really hearing grids talked about at all in the mainstream, and now it's everywhere. There's this sort of realization that they are critical enablers of the clean energy future. And so I was just going to touch on 3 kind of benefits of grid modernization, 3 areas where it can really help. So smarter grids can give kind of more access to information, give customers more access to kind of make more informed energy choices, can enhance grid resiliency, can make sure we more efficiently distribute clean energy to where it's needed and when it's needed. And then we need stronger grids as well, and that's that kind of physical strength, because we've got extreme weather impacts and other impacts that are coming and that the grids need to withstand. So we're doing that by kind of hardening our physical infrastructure, we're securing our networks and our data, and trying to make those systems more resilient to those issues that are coming, sort of continuously maintaining our systems so that we can prevent issues like power outages. And then finally, I was going to pick up, obviously, the cleaner network, which is kind of why we're all here, but a modernized grid can connect more renewable energy resources and more efficiently get those resources to where they're needed, particularly because we're going to see such huge electric demand in people's households in the coming years. And then if we have these kind of more modern grids, we can get that clean energy to where it's needed and where that demand is going to be, which is going to be big. So yeah, I'll leave it there and give it back to Lisa.
Can I ask you a question? You know, obviously I work in this field, but sometimes I too need to like decode. When you say harden the grid, what do you mean by that? Is that, you know, maintaining wires? Is it maintenance, or is it more innovative technologies?
I think it's all of them. I think it's all of them. But but I think one of the key things, which I think we're going to probably come to a bit later, is innovative technologies and how essential they are to that modernizing the grid piece in order to both strengthen the kind of resilience and capacity of our existing grids, but also we'll need it in terms of if we need to build out new grids as well. But yeah, I would say it's all three.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that because I do want to talk about the different technologies that are available. Helen, love to hear from Train's perspective.
Sure. So my name is Helen Walsh-Tiernoni, and I work for Train Technologies. Train Technologies, in case you're unaware, is the largest heating and cooling company in the world. We manufacture products all the way down to minus 90 degrees. So think about pharmaceutical processing, pharmaceutical shipping, all the way up to industrial heating and kind of everything in between. So if it's shipping peroxide safely, or flash freezing burritos, or heating and cooling, maybe not this building, but heating and cooling buildings, and then shipping from a refrigerated transport perspective, that's us. So more than 60% of the world's fresh and frozen is shipped in a Thermo King container, so that's us. And we also provide energy as a service to customers that would like our support there. We have 4,000 technicians in the United States, several hundred Train distribution stores. So we kind of work all the way through the the value chain. So we have kind of a unique perspective from that point of view. I think that, from maybe a couple more things about Train Technologies, just overarchingly. Every person in our company, over 40,000 people, have a sustainability goal every year. We have goals to reduce our footprint up to 1.5 degree alignment by 2030, as well as a net zero goal. And we have a gigaton challenge goal to reduce our customers' emissions from the use of our products by 2030. Okay, so what does that mean for this conversation? Nearly 94% of emissions for us is Scope 3 customers' use of our products. It's all about energy. And so for us to achieve our goals, we have to think about energy use, as well as renewables. We've got to think about both of those things, but also we have to think about cost for our customers, because we can't get customers to want the things we want them to want, so very efficient products, et cetera, if we have not thought through what the cost looks like. So if we think about the overarching grid infrastructure and the growth and the demand that we see over time, especially in this very moment, there are ways that we can reduce that demand and shaving peaks, and I want to make sure that we get into that, Lisa, and have a conversation around ways that we can reduce those peaks and that long-term investment.
Great. Well, I sometimes think, because we all are very familiar with this, that the policymakers, both that are watching across the United States and around the world, and those that are in the halls, understand why it's important from a decarbonization perspective that we think about the grids around the world. So let's make sure we don't overlook that fact. Can you take a little bit of time from your vantage point to discuss why it's important that this process think about the grid if we are concerned about global climate change?
So I make some notes about the modernization of the grid and the things. I think it's important to have a parallel analysis comparing Brazil with UK, Europe, and USA. the consumption per capita of Brazil, it's similar to your consumption in 70s, 80s. 1 point. Second point, our energy matrix is majority green. Our problem with emissions are related with forests and some other issues, okay? So this is very important to us. And the huge challenge is how could we accommodate this increasing of per capita consumption with the grid that we have. The grid that we have is not the grid of the future. No, it's impossible. It's impossible to deal with this, okay? And then nowadays, the problem of Brazil is related with how could we manage renewable sources, our undispatchable renewable sources. This is the huge problem. Okay, we have had already one blackout about the renewable penetration in Brazil, and it will become more frequent. Okay, and then we are supposed to know how to deal with the duck curve. We have many ducks in Brazil, many ducks, and this is a huge challenge. And so, how could accommodate it? We need energy efficiency to permit that the population have a better quality of life. It means that they must have more equipment at home to live better. But we need to do this with optimizing strategy. Okay. And we nowadays each house has a PV plant, okay, and it is in the basis of the resilience of the system, but we are supposed to have storage for this, okay, and this is the current scenario. How could we manage it? Because we must have a way to get together the power utility and the prosumers. They need to talk to each other. It's impossible to do this, and because the grid is in the middle of this war.
Right. I mean, I think that was such a good point. I mean, we are focused on grids, but we don't think about grid optimization or grid modernization or grid expansion in a silo. It's connected to a system. And I think for BCSE, that's one of the biggest messages we give to policymakers is we need to look at this from a more system-oriented, holistic approach. But Louise, you were going to hop in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up. I mean, it's really interesting to hear some of the Brazilian context, some of which I knew, but not all of it. Certainly that you are mostly green energy, which is great. But I wanted to pick up on what you said about in Brazil. You have the grid for now. You don't have the grid for the future, and I think that is a problem probably in pretty much every country in the world. It doesn't matter where you are in terms of emerging economies or others. It's certainly a problem in the UK and the US, and it comes back to what. I mean, I have more experience in the UK. That's where I'm based, but it comes back to what I was saying before, that we're expecting electricity demand to absolutely rocket, and not just from households but also from AI and data centers, the hot topics of the moment. I don't quote me on the numbers, but it's something like doubling our electric demand in the UK and the US by 2030, and the grids just aren't set up for that. And this is why it's so critical that policymakers focus on it, because like you said, Lisa, grids are not siloed. They're an enabler for systems, an enabler for how we sort of live our lives. And if investment isn't put into them, if barriers aren't taken away, if solutions aren't kind of taken to both build them out but also to increase efficiency and capacity so we can use our existing grids as best we can, we're not going to be able to meet that demand that is coming. And I suspect actually the electricity demand is going to be even higher in countries like Brazil and emerging economies. And it's just sort of very important in order to make sure that people have access to electricity and clean electricity as we move through this transition. So I just thought it was interesting because we hear it from, I do a lot of international engagement, we hear that same point from everybody, and I think it is a common challenge.
Lisa, can I jump in?
Go for it.
I want to talk about very quickly about something very nerdy. And Angelo, you talked about the duck curve, and I just want to make sure that people know what the duck curve is, right? So, and I talked about shaving peaks, and I didn't explain what that means. So, so I want to back up and make sure we're all on the same page and speaking the same lovely language. So if we think about the way that energy gets used around the world, if you live in a hot place or it's a hot season, air conditioning really informs the amount of energy that's kind of used in a peak moment, right? And so we talk about this duck curve and kind of the peaks and the valleys in the way that energy is used during the day. So, and maybe you'll expand on that the next time you speak a little bit, yeah?
Can you talk one little bit more about that? Like in the United States and different parts of the country, what does that mean? Because initially we heard about it mostly in California. But why is that, and how is, but now it's changed. Now that conversation is nationwide, but different in different regions of the country.
You're exactly right, Lisa. So if you're in a cold place and you use electricity to heat your home or your buildings, then that peak is different, right? It happens more in the winter time. It's higher in the winter time. In kind of in the morning or late at night, right? In the morning when it's really, really cold out and you're trying to keep folks warm. Versus, so if I'm thinking about like Canada or maybe northern places in Europe, et cetera, that peak is different, and it's different in the winter than it is in the summer. And so if you think about like the afternoon times of the day in very hot places. So when I'm talking about shaving the peak, I'm talking about those peaks in energy use. So wintertime, kind of nighttime, early morning, and then summertime in the afternoons. So I just wanted to make sure that we all speak the same language on this before we dive into more detail.
And then the question for policymakers and industry is, how do we build a system that's affordable, that's reliable, and that's decarbonized over time, that still make sure that we have enough resources to meet those peak demands.
Right.
And traditionally, and this is maybe where Louise and other engineer here can come in, we've built our system to hit that peak. So I'm sure there's many like analogies in other areas that make it simple for people, but if one day out of the year you needed 10 units of energy, we would build the system for 10 units of energy, even though most days you might only need 2 or 3 over the course of the year. So that is a very expensive proposition if we are talking about doubling our grid capacity in a very short period of time, because our grid was built in the United States over 100 years. And there were definitely big boom times in terms of expanding the grid in our history, but to think about doubling the grid in a short period of time, given the dynamics we have with our economy and with communities, it's going to be hard to do that. So if we don't shave the peak, we are back in a model where we have to build for maximum capacity, and I just don't see how that's possible. But I'd love to hear your perspectives about that.
Can I just dive in with a couple more things, Lisa? So we also talk about peaker plants. So those are plants that are kind of turned on and off to come online during those peak demand moments. And, and as we lift up the total demand for energy, these peaks are still going to top up wherever they top up. So if there are ways that we can shave those peaks through more efficient heating and cooling equipment, through passive cooling and heating measures, so now passive cooling and heating does not make my company money, but I think it's very important to shave these peaks and make things more affordable for people, right? Better insulation, better fenestration, better windows, better siting and orientation of how things are sited on a location. So all of those things are ways that we can kind of shave those peaks and bring those needs down. And I think energy efficiency standards, like there's a data center standard, ASHRAE 90.4 for energy efficiency, buildings, ASHRAE 90.1, all of those things are going to be really important to kind of reduce the amount of investment that we need in those grids long term.
Well, another thing to add, which BCSE is very involved in right now, is using the market instruments to send price signals to reduce demand. So demand response programs, but maybe in a more sophisticated and nimble way than we've done it in previous iterations of policies. So there's a very strong opportunity to manage load, and you're kind of alluding to it as a complement to traditional ways to implement demand side emissions reduction or energy reduction opportunities. But how are you seeing those things, Angelo and Louise? We'll start with you, Angelo. Is load management something they're talking about in Brazil?
Yes.
Yep.
In Brazil, we have been discussing in the levels of, in governmental levels, signs of tariff and many modernization of the structure, the regulatory structure of energy sector, in order to accommodate this. The huge problem today, as I said, is not the decarbonization of electric sector. We are green, but
and why are you green? Where are your primary energy sources here in Brazil?
Hydroelectric, wind farms, and solar.
Terrific,
okay?
Thank you. Some in our audience might not know.
And so our challenge right now is to solve the duck curve. What's the matter of the duck curve here in Brazil? The duck curve is the demand curve seen by the power utility. In the end of the day, big, during the day, very low, and then they are very high, very fast, okay, because of the sun. And this is a very complicated situation, because in some places, I have, as instance, 100 during afternoon, and at night 800. It's a ramp up, and it's very complicated to manage the system this way. And so we need a smarter grid to accommodate it. We need to understand how to talk to the devices in order to store energy in the right time. Our challenge is dealing with the time, the right time to do the things, the right time to manage.
Yeah, I think it's really important you mention that, but I also want to ask you, and I want Louise to talk a little bit about load management too, but often we'll get a question and says, well, you said it's because of the sun. You said because of solar energy, we are having this dynamic. And we share with policymakers, you need always a balanced mix of resources, but renewable energy integration is extremely positive for our electricity system. And it is not, all energy resources have load management issues. It's just with more renewables, we need to think about better ways to integrate and take advantage of their full benefits, which is number one, cost. Number two is air quality and environmental benefits like climate change. And with storage, it can be perceived by a grid operator as firm load. So we have to, and then we can optimize it just like we would with any energy resource. So I just think it's important that there are solutions here, and there are such important benefits of having a diverse mix of energy resources, but renewable energy integration is not the culprit here. It's more that we are expanding our energy demand, we need to update infrastructure, and we need to take advantage of the new resources that we have that are affordable and homegrown in the US and in Brazil, right? So it's just very important for our energy security, but I'll let Louise share some thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. I think this isn't a case of blame or like one thing over another. That we all know there's no silver bullets to this. We kind of need to look at everything. So, you know, when we're thinking about how you modernize the grid and how you manage some of these challenges going forward, we do need to rapidly build out grids in some places. That's absolutely true. We will need more grids. We also need to look at non-wire alternatives. So that's like distributed solar and storage, grid enhancing technologies, and that's where I'm going to dive into innovation, if that's okay. That's where I want to take us, because I think for us at National Grid, we're sort of very, and everyone recognizes this, right, that some of the barriers at the moment to modernizing the grid are not just those policy and regulatory barriers that we talk about around permitting and connections. They're around these sort of, I don't want to say competing, because I think they can all live side by side, but sort of overlapping priorities around how we need to rapidly build out the grid. We need to increase the efficiency and capacity of it, but we need to do that in a way that maintains reliability and affordability, particularly for residential customers. In the UK and the US, we've got such high energy prices. I don't know what they're like in Brazil, but it's a problem, is how do we do this and the investments that's needed and keep it affordable. And we need to do that while hitting our kind of clean energy and climate goals. And these are not mutually exclusive and not totally conflicting, but not also always totally aligned goals. So it's like a really tricky balance. And one of the ways that we at National Grid have decided to walk that tightrope is to delve really deeply into innovation and into new and emerging technologies. So in 2018, we set up a venture capital arm. So it's the utility industry's first venture capital arm in Silicon Valley. Since then, we've invested about $500 million in 50 startups. And what we wanted to do was kind of connect utilities with startups to bring some new technology to help us manage our grid, but also scale up some of these new technologies so that they can be used in grids around the world. So it's sort of unlikely bedfellows, but actually it's working really, really well. And we're now using about 80% of the technologies that we've invested in our lines in the UK and the US, and we are seeing sort of significant benefits in terms of efficiency and resilience and capacity of our lines. So if you'll indulge me, I'll just give a few examples. I mean, there are literally dozens, and I would really encourage anyone to have a look at our website, National Grid Partners website. We have dozens of case studies that are talking about all these amazing technologies, these amazing companies. But I'll pick out a few. And forgive me because I am not an engineer, so this is very high level. But there's a company called TS Conductor that's created a carbon core conductor which can carry up to 3 times more electricity than a traditional steel core conductor, which is just so much more efficient. We've got a company called Exodigo, which uses advanced sensors and AI and helps us see what's kind of underground before we start work on infrastructure projects, so we can avoid time delays and kind of extra costs and that sort of thing. We've got Line Vision, and that's based in Boston, and it enables us they use sensors on our transmission towers, and it's enabling us to increase the capacity of our lines by 30%. It's massive, and that we can avoid more build out in these very built up areas by doing that. And then lastly, I'll pick up one which is more around the kind of intersection of nature and grids. AI Dash is a company that's using AI to tell us when trees and other vegetation are more likely to kind of disrupt power lines. And since we've started using that in our lines in Massachusetts, our storm-related outages are down by 30%. So these are like a tiny handful of the amazing technologies that we're investing in and that we're now sharing with others, and we hope others invest in. But for us, innovation is absolutely essential to do this quickly, to do it affordably, and to do it in a way that is the least disruptive by kind of making the most of what we have. And that's kind of where we really think the future should focus.
I mean, those percentages are staggering. They're not 3%. You said 30%. And, I hear similar, kind of looking at grid-connected buildings or just looking again holistically at the grid with other assets in our economy. I hear Trane Technologies talking similarly about really amazing figures when you do building management initiatives and optimize buildings and then connect it to the grid. Can you share a little bit about that, Helen,
Sure.
please?
Yeah, I mean, again, several case studies on our website, but certainly, like, we've worked with schools and private building owners and public building owners to, kind of look at their energy use and help them to reduce that as well as optimize it, and then also shift demand. And generally, maybe not all the time, but generally, that is a cost savings for the customer, and it also is a reduction in the amount of energy that they use. And so they're looking at technologies like shifting demand. So more basic vocabulary for everybody, right? So shifting demand, what does that mean? That means that we're moving the demand. We might preheat a building or pre-cool a building to shift the energy use away from that peak time of the day. We might store energy in water, either heating it up or cooling it down to freezing, if we think about thermal energy storage. So those load shifting options are things that we kind of put into place with partners when they're looking, especially when the rate structure at the utility offers a benefit to move that demand away from that peak time of the day, so that the utility doesn't have to turn on that peaker plant, right? The demand goes up, it doesn't have to go way up if we can shift some of those loads away. So, but we have worked with partners all over the country in the U.S. to assist them with their energy use. Maybe just one more piece around this, Lisa. I think I cannot imagine, Louise, having to operate a facility based on the endlessly changing demand. So to me, there's this demand problem, challenge, right, where it's just unpredictable, and it's just hard to understand, and the instability of trying to operate a system, trying to operate an energy manufacturing facility is what I'm going to call it, at an uneven level across the day. So, I think that that's one of the challenges that you all face, and where I think that it impacts your overall cost of operation, which in turn impacts the cost of the use of electricity for our customers and for manufacturers around the world. And I don't know if you have thoughts about that, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but that seems to me to be extremely challenging.
Yeah, that is getting a little bit more into system operation, which is not what National Grid does. But so I won't comment on it. But just anecdotally, I did used to work in the system operator that used to be part of National Grid, and I agree with you. I mean, super challenging. I can't imagine doing that job either. But one thing that is very easy to predict in the UK is when people are going to turn on the kettle to have their cup of tea when they come home, and also there were always massive spikes when there was a big football match on, like the World Cup or something, in half time, and everyone would go and turn on their kettles. It was always quite fun to see the huge, and we could predict that pretty well, and then sort of know to expect it and have the system ready to deal with it. But I agree with you. I think very challenging normally to know when those spikes and things are going to hit.
And if there's a way to smooth that out, right, so that you don't have to turn on the peaker plant.
Right. Well, I mean, I think your example, Helen, gets to the fact that we need to be working at all levels, and there needs to be alignment as we're thinking about new systems, technology integration, and the role with policy. Go ahead, Angelo.
I forgot to mention that here in Brazil we have a federal law that obliges the energy enterprise to invest in R&D and energy efficiency. And this law was changed in 2023 for a good way. Why? Because this law obliged the power utilities to invest, but they have been investing in papers, only in PhDs, in master's program, and from 2023 on, they are supposed to invest in startups and to develop technology, to deliver products, to deliver real solutions for the grid, for the population. So I think in the next 5 years we'll see a huge a huge development in the electric sector in Brazil because of the change of this law.
Well, I want to cover two more topics. We'll do them a little more rapid fire. One is just to talk about why are these great things not happening more, and then also to talk a little bit about multilateral processes and COP. But before I do, I think you raised a really good point. So in the United States, we too are investing in grid modernization, research, development, and deployment. And just this week in the United States, we are focused on our budget, and the Department of Energy, other agencies in the United States are thinking about innovation and our competitive edge, and having consistent, engaged public-private partnership on research, development, and deployment is critical. And this is something that BCSE educates and advocates on. And so I just want to make sure that if anyone here or anybody who's watching online is interested in our policy recommendations for grid, we have many, as well as for other aspects of energy and energy efficiency, research, development, and deployment. Happy to share that. But so why aren't these new innovations happening, or why are we having this conversation? I mean, there's so much out there. What are the barriers to keeping this from happening?
I think the most important barriers, I'm talking about Brazil. Brazil does not have the custom to invest in long-term investments, and we know that some researches demand time to be developed, and normally the power utilities do not see the horizon more than 5 years, and some researches are not feasible in 5 years. I think the biggest barrier is to show that research demands time, demands investment, but it's very important for the benefit of the whole humanity to develop long-term research.
This is not something I am hugely knowledgeable about at all, but just a couple of things that I've picked up. I think quite similar, I think, to what you were saying. I think, talking from a UK perspective, and this is broader than National Grid, generally very good at doing that very early investment and that sort of seeding an innovation and a thought. But actually, it's that kind of middle bit of scaling the investment up, and that sort of middle, longer-term piece that doesn't get so much investment. Presumably because it's quite risky and returns maybe are not clear. So it's not something I know that much about. But there was another thing I wanted to say, and it's just gone out of my head. I think the other barrier is perhaps a cultural one, and I hope that this is changing as we think about innovation. But I think the whole point of innovation is that you need to be able to fail. And you have to kind of fail and fail and fail again. And I think a lot of our investment systems and whether that's public or private, are not set up to allow for that failure and therefore to support kind of these innovative startups as they go through their journey.
Yeah, really good points.
Only a short
Sure.
point. In Brazil, they like R.
Okay. Yeah.
R and D.
So maybe Lisa, I'm going to talk a little bit about the uptake of known technologies and some of the barriers there, right? There are great technologies around demand management, around load shifting, around energy storage, right? Long duration energy storage, greater than 8 hours, shorter duration energy storage. There's great technologies out there. And one of the challenges that I see is that the benefit of those is not linked to the person that's investing in that thing. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that I am a building owner and I have the opportunity to add energy storage to my building, right? So I could put in energy storage, and that would reduce the overall peak for all of society and the investment that's needed in the grid, because I'm shaving that peak, right? I'm going to store the energy and use it during that peak time. I don't necessarily get that benefit. That benefit is for all of society, but I'm writing the check for that, so maybe I don't want to write the check for that, right? Because I don't see the return on my investment. And so thinking about policies that can encourage people to invest in peak shaving. I know this is very nerdy and tedious, but those very basic principles where we're rewarding people to do the thing we want them to do for all of society, I think it's really important that policymakers be thinking about that, for home, but also around the world, right? How do we get people to do the thing we want them to do?
That was great. We may come back and talk more about barriers if we have time or if we have questions on it, but let's talk a little bit about the COP. What are you hopeful to accomplish while you're here, and how does that relate to our conversation on grids? Why don't we start with you, Angelo?
I think COP, it's very important to understand that we need a value proposition strategy. What is the value proposition of home energy storage, of modernization? For instance, I'm talking about Brazil. Why it's good to have a green iron industry in Brazil? Because of IREX. So, if you in high level can implement policies that will generate value proposition, you can reach the basis of the society.
I mean, the sort of primary aim for us being here is about that best practice sharing that I was talking about, and I think COPs give us the opportunity to connect and collaborate both with policymakers, so connecting policymakers and businesses, but also businesses and businesses, peer connections, either to businesses that we know really well, but just in a different forum and talking about different things, but also to new businesses in different sectors, but grid operators around the world. And I think COP is really important for that, and this side of the COP, outside the negotiations, is so important for fostering that kind of multilateral collaboration. I think one of the most value I think we can bring as National Grid is to be talking about these innovative technologies and other things that we're doing that if someone else hears and thinks, oh God, well, I might look into that and think about it for our grid. That is amazing. Maybe they've leapfrogged something, maybe they've saved some time, some money. And I think the more that we can do to share sort of case studies, examples of things that are working in the real world, the better. Obviously, there is a kind of policy side to COP, and it's great to see in the last couple of years more of a focus on grids in the kind of negotiations agenda, but and would always kind of want to keep encouraging policymakers and regulators to think about this, as we've been talking about, as a critical enabler. But that kind of collaboration that you get here and the ability to break down some barriers and talk to people you wouldn't normally and share those real actions is a real value point for us.
Helen, what about you?
Yeah, I think just to expand, Louise, agree fully with both of you. I think that this COP presidency is focused on action. So to me, that's the uptake of known innovations that are kind of out there. We need to think about the policy measures that bring them to fruition, and then and then working together on these complex problems. Right? This whole grid issue doesn't get solved. First of all, it's a problem everywhere, one, right? Number two, it doesn't get solved by just looking at demand or just looking at supply. We kind of have to all look at this whole issue together and find kind of innovative and clever solutions, which are invented and available commercially, some which may not be, to kind of address these issues and reduce cost for business owners and families around the world.
Can I just jump in, because I totally agree with you. And I just want to say, I think it is a problem everywhere. It's also a massive opportunity everywhere. And these innovations are super exciting. And I think we should also think really positively about these amazing kind of new economic growth and new business ideas that we can be getting into. I mean, it's really exciting while being extremely complicated at the same time.
Any further comments on that, Angelo? Or
No.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking as you were talking about my days at COP, because we get a lot of these questions. Are you really breaking down any new barriers, through participation here? And when it comes to this action agenda, I really do think we are, because just like we would in the halls of Congress or at a state or city committee hearing, people have problems they're trying to solve, and we have access to over 190 countries here at this setting year after year. And the delegates come up to you afterwards, or if we set up a bilateral meeting with a country, they want to know, this is our problem as we look at climate change, whether it be resilience, energy security, economic growth, climate mitigation. They have challenges, and then we can come as a resource and share our experiences and share the technologies that we know about and how we may be able to deploy them or not, and we can partner. And we do have that access here that we don't get in other settings. It's a very unique place. And I would also, there's a lot of conversation about nationally determined contributions, especially at this COP, as we're reviewing many new ones. I mean, that's basically the action plan. That's the vision and the roadmap that countries want to set as they think about climate change. And they're not thinking about it in a silo. They're looking at it from an economic and security point of view as well as an energy transition point of view. So I think we're all very aligned, but as you said, Helen, we can't do it on our own. We can't do it at a community level on our own, and we certainly can't do it at a global level on our own. So we really need to be together. And I find it really inspiring, even though it can be challenging at times. But we're going to wrap up. I just would love to hear, anything we didn't discuss when it relates to grids or this process that you want to highlight for our audience before we close. So Angela, yes, please go first.
Okay. What I have been seeing, I travel all over the world, is that we need to communicate better, to share knowledge. I see this in AEE because there are many countries that have been facing in the last decades about grid resilience. It was not part of Brazilian reality since 2020. But from 2020 on, we need to be aware about grid resilience, about hurricanes, about flood, and then they have many good initiatives. I'm sure that you all also have. We need to communicate better, to share knowledge in order to have shortcuts. I think the key point is to have focus on some subject and to share knowledge about that subject. It's be very profitable.
I was in a session yesterday where they were talking about democratizing energy, and they were talking about how grid technologies in some ways can greater democratize the energy modernization and transformation that we seek, because it's not so much always about hard costs of equipment. There are optimization technologies that may be much more cost effective, or even maybe not open source, but much more widely disseminated now that we didn't have 5 years ago. Plus we have the practical experience from your companies in implementing them with your customers and the communities in which you operate. But all right, closing thoughts for Louise and Helen.
I'm going to totally repeat what you've said, and just that sharing piece is so important. I already said that's kind of why we're here. We also, that innovation arm I spoke about earlier, NGP, set up a Next Grid Alliance with which is a utility alliance of, I don't know the numbers, but over 150, I think, sharing innovative ideas. We're part of the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, UNESA, that was set up in 2028, and we're sharing kind of actions and innovation through that as well. We're part of Green Grids Initiative. We're sort of members of multiple of these international initiatives to share more of this and break down those barriers, and I think that is the kind of most important thing to do going forward. And I agree that I think the action agenda focus at this COP has really shone a light on how important that is, and that's really, really useful.
No, I agree with everything you all have said. I do think every time I'm on a panel, I learn something new, so thank you all for that. And I think that this collaboration is invaluable as we look to solve problems that are, overcome challenges that we maybe understand 90% of what to do, but we can't do it alone, and we need to figure out the other 10% of what to do. So, and I'm making up those numbers, of course, but I think collaboration like this is always invaluable to help learn more about how we can work together at home and around the world.
Yeah, and so as we close, again, the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, we're working with policymakers at all levels of government in the United States. We need that partnership. We need that alignment. I think, Angelo, as you said, we need long-term thinking. These investments are, decades strong, and they don't align with political cycles, and they shouldn't. They're for the public benefit. They're for our economic security and prosperity. So, we're sitting here in the heart of U.S. state and local government engagement at COP30. So I just want to say, for all of those policymakers that are watching, we're here to work with you, as well as many other business organizations, and think of us as a connector. And we're in an energy renaissance in the United States right now, and there's no part of the country that is not thinking about energy. And it's a tremendous opportunity, as you all have said. So it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I wish you a very successful week ahead here at COP30. And thanks again to our hosts. It's been a pleasure to be here. So,
Thank you,
Lisa.
Thanks.